So on the previous episode of the End Ayoub podcast, we were discussing rights, or at least we tried to discuss rights. I think we discussed rights, right? Right?
Oh yeah. Right.
Correct. And we ended off on the topic of the Second Amendment, and I think the way that we got there was by sort of alluding to the fact that shit's gonna change. We can change it if we want to, but that one
rights are amorphous.
They're amorphous.
Right? Rights are subject to the whims of the system that agrees on them and that enforces them.
And to be clear, we as citizens are that system as much as we possibly can be within this form.
Cogs in the machine.
Within this form of government, it is the closest thing to us agreeing, such that we get the things that we want. You suggested though that the Second Amendment is something that is likely to not change, or doesn't need to be changed, or shouldn't be changed. Is that right? Am I missing?
I would not change it.
Okay.
I wouldn't change it. Or let's be even more clear than that. I would not remove it.
So, I mean, the clearest line we can draw is the regular mass shootings that occur in the United States. Okay. And I would argue that those mass shootings are not as a consequence of the Second Amendment necessarily. And that I don't necessarily think that they can be fixed entirely by removal of the Second Amendment.
Okay.
But in my current view, we do not seem to have the collective rationale to deal with the problem that we have. And so I have decided to take the position of extremism and suggest that we don't actually need this thing.
So what is the problem that we actually have, as you see it?
Well, okay, so what the problem is we actually have could be many variable things, but the direct consequence is that we seem to kill each other with guns lots. And lots way more than many other countries on the planet. The first of which is the regular mass shootings that occur either in schools or grocery stores or movie theaters or churches. The places where we would like to think as a society that we ought not to worry too much about getting shut up in our modern civilization. But that's precisely where we do get shut up quite frequently.
I want to put out a disclaimer first. I have a friend. And
don't say his name.
I learned my lesson.
Yeah, okay.
And he is going to watch this podcast.
Okay.
So I'm going to apologize to him right now because unfortunately what I lack, which is something that he has because he cares enough about it to have this information, is a lot of the numbers on frequency of mass shootings versus other types of gun crime, versus deaths caused by guns, which is
so statistics.
All different.
He's got lots of statistics.
He has the numbers,
cool.
Right? So he knows a lot of those numbers. Okay. And those numbers are useful in either corroborating or refuting points that you and I will be making throughout this.
Sure, but he's not here.
I apologize. Right. So I apologize to him for not having this information available.
Give him a fake name so I can call him out.
Brett.
First of all, yeah. Brett, I'm sorry that your name is Brett, because it might as well be Todd or Brad. Yeah. So sorry that you have a shitty name. Also, you're not here, so it doesn't fucking matter what you know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Carry on.
I'm so excited to have him watch this. Oh, it's going to be funny. Okay. But yeah. So Brett is definitely, so if the spectrum of this discussion that we're going to have is represented by you on like this side over here and Brett is on that side over here, I'm probably like over here. I'm definitely closer to Brett than I am to where you are. Maybe we might find out that I'm in the middle.
Well, okay. So
if your ultimate if your ultimate position is get rid of the second, right? And Brett's ultimate position is
Keep it.
don't change a goddamn thing, right? I'm definitely closer to Brett right now than I am to you.
Okay, fair enough. And so to be clear, my position of getting rid of the Second Amendment is a sort of a theoretical extreme position that I'm taking now, just because it doesn't seem that we as a society have the wherewithal for nuance. And that we don't seem to be capable. So as a counter, I will reject nuance, but we don't seem to be capable.
I mean,
that's what I'm doing. No, I fully admit it, but we don't seem to be capable of understanding the value of the Second Amendment while simultaneously understanding the value of curtailing the goddamn nonsense that we keep seeing and that we keep experiencing. And the rhetorical positions that we have taken up, whether in the media or as politicians directly, or even as citizens in our discourse, the positions that we have taken are effectively, we either keep it at all costs, regardless of the costs, or we have to get rid of it no matter the consequence. So I'm taking I don't even know that it's the devil's advocate position, but it is an extreme position, just because in my experience, and I have a gun, I own a firearm, and I have done for quite some time.
What, just for, is it okay, like, if you don't mind saying, what do you own?
It's a shotgun. Okay. It is in my possession purely for the highly unlikely and terrible circumstance that I need to use it to defend either myself or others around me in a situation that is very, very narrow, because I don't carry it with me.
So like home invasion
kind of right? If I'm home and shit is going down and I need to stop something, that's my method of doing it. And I chose a shotgun because it is large, it is noisy, it is imposing. It does all of the things without it being fired that a gun or that a defense mechanism would do, is to deter without the use of it in the first place.
And your surroundings, you live effectively in the middle of nowhere. You don't have immediate neighbors. Now, relatively speaking, in terms of the dense suburbs in which we both grew up, right? No one lives that close to you. People are literally acres away from you in any direction.
Correct.
So having a weapon that likely has the potential to eject a shot or slug that will exit your walls is not a problem, because you're likely not gonna have any human collateral damage as a consequence of you wantonly shooting.
But it's interesting that you mentioned that,
house.
because I purchased this firearm whilst I lived in the suburbs, whilst I lived very close to people where, yes, projectiles could leave my walls and go into other walls and impact others. And I purchased a shotgun purely because I could load it with shot such that it wouldn't do that.
So birdshot
or buckshot. Depending on what it is.
Doesn't penetrate drywall.
Buckshot can penetrate drywall, but it can't necessarily penetrate multiple layers of drywall, and also wood cladding and or brick cladding and things like that. So a slug, that might be a different story. A slug might be able to go through multiple things. But for sure, birdshot and
Brett is a gun enthusiast. He might be shouting at the screen right now.
You're incorrect because of the particular specific gravity of that one particular shot in this one. What if you hit the wind? Yeah, no, I get it. Fuck it, but it's a game of odds. So the reason why I chose that weapon was because it was the least likely to impact others, and it was the least likely to miss. It was the thing that I didn't need to aim nearly as well. And if I found myself in a position on the floor with a shotgun like this, I didn't have to think too hard, and I could just pull the trigger and disperse the issue. So as a gun owner who purchased the gun for the purpose of home defense, I have found myself in a position where I am at once perfectly fine with my choice and fully knowledgeable about its operation and understanding of its danger as a weapon and also as a tool, but find that I am regularly looking at the world going, This is not a thing that I actually need. It's not a thing that I require. It might prove useful one day. I hope it never does.
I mean,
But it's
a really good analogy would be insurance.
Sure.
It's insurance.
It
We
is.
can debate the odds. We can debate the odds.
It's kind of meaningless,
of
but no, it's a good analogy. It is.
yeah,
It
it's
is
insurance.
effective insurance, because if you were to argue it as a tool, I have many tools, and based upon where I live currently in the woods, an axe is a very useful tool that I need. A chainsaw is a very useful tool that I need.
You use them regularly.
Use them regularly. They are actively tools. So the argument now that a gun is a tool, because that is an argument that is made, and to some degree I can agree that it can be a tool. For my purposes,
Well, no, it is a tool. By definition, it's a tool.
But for my purposes,
in the Venn diagram of language, right? Weapons are not apart from tools. The circle that defines weapons exists entirely within the subset of the circle of tools.
Sure. But it's also an active weapon.
Yes.
Okay. An axe can be a weapon, but I did not purchase, nor will I use the axe as a weapon, except that one time. But we won't talk about that here. And so I've found myself in a position where I do not believe any longer that I need this tool.
Are you going to get rid of it?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to get rid of it, and here's why. Well, we can tailor that a little bit. I have considered getting rid of it, but I also understand that getting rid of it merely for the reasons that I think guns should go and because of mass shootings doesn't actually serve that purpose. Right? Me getting rid of my shotgun, whether destroying it or, doing one of those buyback things or whatever, doesn't actually solve the problem. Which is why when we go to nuance, we go, well, getting rid of the Second Amendment doesn't actually solve the problem.
Okay.
Because the problem exists outside of my owning a firearm.
I think that at this point in the discussion, we need to start to define the problem.
Okay. Would you like to do that?
I'll give you my take on what I think the problem is. I think the problem, or at least one facet of the problem, broadly speaking, is mental health. I think that
I smile at you.
I think that there's crazy, and I think that you're never going to get rid of crazy. There's a certain amount of crazy. There's a certain type of crossed wires in the brain. It's never going to go away. You're always going to have to deal with the potential that crazy is going to do crazy shit. And no amount of human intervention, community intervention, county intervention, state intervention, federal intervention is going to prevent crazy. But then there's another type of mental health that I don't call crazy, that is a consequence of that's a consequence of neglect. That is fixable. Let's put it in the broadest sense. There's unfixable mental health, and there's fixable mental health.
Okay.
And I think that the ratio, I have no data to support this, but I think that the ratio
Brett does.
Fixable, huh?
Brett does.
No, actually, I doubt that he has this either. The ratio of fixable to unfixable mental health is like 90-10. That's what I think.
Okay.
I think that there is 9 times to 10 times as much fixable mental health problems as there are unfixable problems. So,
okay, hold on.
if we as a society,
Hold on.
hang on, let me wrap it up.
Get it.
If we as a society decide to address the fixable mental health issues, we're going to watch a massive drop in mass shootings, gun deaths by suicide, and a whole other types of issues that involve gun violence.
Sure.
I think go down.
I generally agree with you.
Okay.
So here's my question to that point, because this is, I hate to say it, it's a trope. Yes, mental health. Totally. It's the human condition is what it is. And to argue that in the United States we have so much more mental health problems than anywhere else in the developed world, I think is a bit far afield. And while I agree with you, and there's lots of things and reasons and nuances that lead us to what I think is the mental health issue, and we can talk about that, but sometimes it's just the guns. And fixing mental health as a thing, right? This big, giant monster of a thing is highly complex, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it requires quite a lot of effort and quite a lot of agreement as a society, and maybe
it requires nuance.
Yeah,
it requires energy,
and it requires
time
maybe a
money
wholesale changing of a lot of things about our society.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No doubt.
And so my question then is the amount of gun deaths, because forget mass shootings, let's just say gun deaths. Is the amount of gun deaths in the United States worth hanging on to for however long it takes to fix mental health? Or should we get rid of the guns, cut back on the gun deaths by a good bit, because we know that that works, whether we like it or not, we know that that actually works, and then say, okay, fuck, we've halted the extraordinary quantity of gun deaths, and now we also understand that there's a mental health problem that we can slowly fix, but without the consequence of constant gun deaths.
Here's why that approach won't work.
Okay.
I don't know all the statistics. I know some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And one statistic that I have read is that approximately 60% of gun deaths are suicide. They're not violence of one person killing somebody else or another or a group of people. Or
I
whatever.
don't know this to
It's
be
suicide.
true, but we're going to pretend it is.
So almost 2/3 of the problem is not something that guns fix, that getting rid of guns fixes.
Well, hold on a second. Because if those suicides are by gun,
yeah,
removing the gun will remove the
Yeah.
ease by which somebody could kill themselves.
no, I don't buy that for
You
a
don't
second.
think it's easier to
Nope.
blow your head off with a shotgun than it is to sit there and cut your wrist up and wait?
I think it's even easier to start your car in your garage.
No.
I think it's even easier to jump off a bridge or stand in front of a train.
No, it's not. And I'll tell you why it's not. Because those things...
I think it's easier to take a bunch of Oxy.
Those things...
Or
no,
fuck Oxy.
it's not.
Take a bunch of Advil.
It's not.
Take like 15 Advil.
15? No, you need more than 15 Advil. Lots more. Lots more. And you know why the problem with all of the methods that you just laid out? They all take time, effort, and planning.
I mean, not really.
Yeah, because
who doesn't have Tylenol or Advil in their
I do not
home?
currently possess enough
Who doesn't have a car?
Advil. And even
doesn't have a garage?
Yeah, but again, okay, so let's say I take my car. Now I got to go to my car, I got to get it, I got to put it in the garage, I got to close the door, I got to start and run the car, I got to open the windows on my car, I got to get out of my car and sit in the garage. Now, how long does it take for the car to produce?
No, you just sit in your car, dude.
How long does it take for the car to produce enough CO, carbon monoxide, to fill my garage, to render me unconscious until I die? That takes time. It takes many minutes of sitting there with yourself in that place.
Just take a nap.
No, but see, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. A gun is a very quick decision. It's a very quick and very effective method. If I have the thought to want to kill myself, I can go to the gun, I put a bullet in it, done. There's no delay between me pulling the trigger and me being dead. If I slit my wrists, I gotta wait. I got about a minute and a half, maybe 2, before I go unconscious. Not die, go unconscious. I got a lot of time to think about holding my wrist tight. I got a lot of time to think about getting up out of my car and leaving the garage. I got a lot of time to think about throwing up after I take all those Advil. By the way, I'm pretty sure it would take a lot of Advil. Like a lot. Like bottles of Advil.
No, not at all. The average, a single dose of like ibuprofen is 200 milligrams. That's one pill, right? When you have like a lot of pain, for a person of our build, our size, if we have a lot of pain, you could take like between 800 and like 1200 milligrams of ibuprofen. You don't want to take much more than that because then you're going to start to fuck with your kidneys pretty badly. So, like, and they prescribe that to you. Like, you can find 800 milligram pills of ibuprofen. Like, if you had like tooth surgery recently or whatever, shit like that, and they don't want to give you oxy for whatever reason, right? Because they're afraid you're going to get addicted, which is bullshit anyway. But like, yeah, you can take high doses, but we're still talking about 4 pills, 5 pills, 6 pills. If you take a bottle or half a bottle of aspirin, dude, you're fucking gone. Now, I'll grant you, it's not as quick. I will. That's a good point.
Currently, right now, 3,200 milligrams of ibuprofen is the maximum recommended amount per day for an adult. 3,200 milligrams.
What?
I'm telling you what the internet's saying. And here's the thing. Here's what ibuprofen overdose looks like. Tinnitus, heartburn, nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, diarrhea, dizziness, blurred vision, rash, sweating. Severe symptoms can include difficult or slow breathing, convulsions, hypotension, which is low blood pressure, seizures, little to no urine production, severe headache, and perhaps a coma. The quantity of ibuprofen you would have to... Forget it. Fuck ibuprofen. This is not like... That's a cry for help. Taking a bottle of ibuprofen is a cry for help. And okay, fine. That's a legitimate thing that people do. And okay, fine. The point about the gun.
No, I'll grant you that.
Quick.
Of all of the methods that we've described, nothing.
Because even jumping off a bridge, if you got a tall enough building that your skull's going to explode on impact, you still got to get the fuck up there.
Right.
You can change your mind a lot between the idea and the skull cracking.
Sure. But there's another part to this. Which is, and I work in the government.
I work in the government.
So let me tell you.
So he's the man, is what he's saying. He is the problem.
This is, I know. When I say what I'm about to say, this is the truth. When you get a regulation on the books and it's temporary, it's not. Ever. It never gets repealed. Ever. It stays.
This is false.
Right?
But I understand your point. It's difficult.
Might be the only example that I can think of where a regulation, where a rule, where a whatever has been walked back. It is extremely difficult when you have a bureaucracy as large and grindy as the U.S. government to say we're going to make a constitutional amendment, right, at such a high level. I mean, it's literally, there's no higher level in our country.
No, that's literally it.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you're going to make a change at that level, and it's temporary?
Wait, hold on. Who said anything about temporary? What are you talking about?
Well.
How?
Here's the thing.
I'm confused.
I made an assumption.
Okay.
That in your hypothetical, where we get rid of guns, right?
Yeah.
And we immediately lower the gun deaths and then start to tackle the enormous problem of mental health. I played that scenario out. You didn't say any of this. This is all me.
Sure.
My assumption was over the next hypothetical 50 to 100 years, we start to get a handle on the mental health issue, and we see noticeable improvements in the mental health of our citizens and whatever, to such an extent where if we wanted to, we could reintroduce guns into society without fear of people blowing their brains out, shooting up schools.
Okay, hold on. Let me, because I may have misunderstood you. You're saying that we ditched the guns and we tackled mental health, and 50 or so years later, we didn't figure out mental health.
No,
we
no,
did. We did. And we're all just great.
It worked.
We're appreciably better.
Maybe not great, but we're better.
Appreciably better.
We're a lot better than we were.
Okay.
I'll even give you 100 years. All right. Forget
Sure,
50.
sure,
Let's
sure.
say 100
Whatever.
years.
Yeah,
all right.
okay.
Through a lot of money and effort, we figure it out. We figure out what we're doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We make our society better. All this good shit. And we're at a point now where, if we wanted to, we could return guns back into
because we decided through that process that it was in fact mental health. It wasn't really ever the guns, and now we're so much better. Give us guns. We like guns.
Right.
Okay, I see.
So that was my assumption that I had played. That was all the extra stuff that I put on top of your scenario.
Sure.
Right?
And that doesn't have to not be the case, but yeah, sure.
But see, here's the other thing. All we're doing right now is talking about the idea of guns from the narrow point of view of preventing unnecessary gun deaths,
As opposed to the necessary gun deaths.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, right, like there are legitimate scenarios of self-defense.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And also defense of property.
Well, but like, okay, so because we're here, in your view, a self-defense is a
Somebody
necessary
comes to rob you.
A necessary gun. So, but if we've fixed, is a scenario where we have fixed mental health or have not fixed mental health? Because somebody coming to rob you, is that mental health?
No, but that is a societal problem. You
Sure.
know what I mean? Like if they're coming to rob you, it's likely because they're disenfranchised or whatever, and they're pissed off. They got a chip on their shoulder. They're resentful. They've been neglected their whole fucking life. Some shit like that. Yeah.
Okay. So in the scenario where you just laid out, though, is the necessary death before or after we fixed mental health?
No, I'm talking about
now, currently.
I'm talking about now.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. As it stands right now, right? The set of total deaths by gun, right? A large amount of that, most of it, right, is because of suicide. So that's mental health, I would say, right?
Sure.
I don't think there's ever, unless you can claim that they're legitimate. I mean, maybe you've got a couple of people who are doing it because they found out that they're terminally ill and they're going to be in pain for the rest of their lives, so they decided to blow their brains out. In which case, I'll be honest with you, I have a hard time disagreeing with that choice. So that might actually be a valid instance where suicide is a legitimate
Let's
option.
call that a necessary
I would prefer to
gun
do it
death.
by an overdose, like morphine or whatever. But if you have a gun handy, maybe it's just as easy for you to eat the barrel. Fine. But most of the people who are killing themselves with guns are doing it because they are mentally unhealthy, and there's a good chance that if they were tended to properly, they could become healthy.
Perhaps, yes.
So that's one portion, right? Sure. And then the other portion of gun deaths is people killing other people, right? Not killing themselves,
Sure.
all right? So there's two flavors of people killing other people. There's people killing other people where it's like unwarranted violence, like gang violence and stuff like that.
I would argue that that violence is more warranted
crime,
than crime is
and crime.
That's a reason,
right?
Yeah, but okay.
And then there's the gun deaths that are caused in defense of the self or the property, right? So a response to crime. So there's gun deaths that are criminal acts themselves, and then there are gun deaths that are responses to criminal acts.
There are also gun deaths that are an accidental consequence of any one of those scenarios where
collateral damage, or a kid
damage.
gets into your gun safe or whatever, and pulls the trigger because he's trying to impress his friends or something like that,
which is unfortunately common.
Sure, I don't know what the I don't know what the numbers are on accidental gun deaths.
And look, statistics
they could be very, very small.
Statistics are generally useless in this conversation, because all they do is to serve a point in one way or another that it's good or it's bad. It does not matter how many people are dying unnecessarily from guns. It is too many, I think. Period.
So that kind of requires us to go, I think, into a more fundamental discussion. The value of human life.
No, we don't need to do that, because the value of human life can be determined in multiple ways by multiple people, and it's sort of irrelevant. Because at that point, if we can,
if human life doesn't matter at all, then we don't have a problem here.
Well, right.
So it is relevant.
So we can simply agree that human life has a value.
Sure.
So
But
yeah,
if we agree that it has a value and that value is finite, right? Then there's math to be done. The math is it worth the cost of implementing a solution versus the amount of deaths
well,
that occur?
but okay, so
And the calculus on that could be, depending on the value that we place on life, the answer could be no. So dependent upon the value that we place on human life,
11, I think it's
the math
11,
could say that,
I think it's $11.4 million, roughly speaking, is the U.S. government's tabulation of a human life's worth.
I think it varies by agency.
That's true. Yeah, the Department of Defense may have a different number.
I've seen 7 million. I've seen 11 million. I've seen different estimations.
You're absolutely right. From a societal perspective, if we're taking the position of big government doing a thing to solve a problem, then yes, this needs to be tabulated. It is not worth wholesale changing the government's operations on society for the life of one person. Sorry, that one person, but you're not that important. You're not that useful, and you don't cost that much to make it worthwhile.
It might not, again, depending upon what the number is, it might not be worth it for a million people.
But let's take it from a societal perspective, because forget government actuaries for a moment, because yes, you're right. In that scenario, there's math to be done. But let's take it from a societal perspective. You've got a child that you are now sending to public places to go to school and be educated. Okay.
Daycare. Fortunately, I don't think daycares have been shot up yet. But yeah, daycare,
I mean, they've been blown up. We've had that.
Okay.
So we've got that going for us, which is nice.
Which doesn't get fixed by guns, but
no.
whatever.
I mean, if only we could just shoot the bombs. That'd be neat.
Or just ban all propane tanks and every kind of explosive ever.
Well, okay, okay, let's just do this for real quick. Well, if we ban all guns, we have to ban all knives, and if we ban all knives, then we have to ban all sticks, and if we ban all, and I get it. Okay, fine. There's diminishing returns, though.
Don't dismiss that.
It's easy to dismiss because it is significantly easier to use a gun for its purpose of being a weapon to kill and injure others than it is for just about any of the other handheld weapon tools that we have.
How about a car?
It is really easy to drive your car into a crowd of people, but we don't.
Sure.
We don't. How come? Not nearly as often. Now, more people die in this country from automobile accidents, but we don't care about that one. That is a different conversation.
I mean, if we're talking about death mattering and people's lives mattering, why can't we be
We're not talking
consistent?
about people's lives mattering necessarily. We're talking about a particular segment of it. The automobile.
Why bother with the gun or changing gun laws or gun rights or the Second Amendment if people's lives don't matter?
It's not that people's lives don't matter. It's that if we're gonna use the example of the car, okay, the number of people killed in the United States, and I can't wait for Brett's statistics on this one, are the number of people killed in the United States by an automobile maliciously are way lower than with a gun. And yes, cars can be used as weapons for sure. And the car used as a tool is actually a very dangerous and deadly endeavor that we all agree to partake. Right? But it's highly regulated, and we have safety measures to try to reduce those, which we have quite well over the years. Seatbelts, airbags, better structural components of cars, safety features like radar, cruise control, etc. We've taken steps to reduce those, and we don't freak the fuck out about that. We don't get upset because there is no right to operate a motor vehicle in the Constitution. There's nothing about the Constitution that says that the Americans have the right to four-wheel mobile transport and in the 3,000-pound weapon. So we can regulate that, and we can take steps to impact the negative aspects of driving motor vehicles such that we have reduced negative impacts. But we take no steps with the firearms.
Mind you, that's not true.
What steps have we taken with firearms?
There are background checks that have to be done. There are mandatory waiting periods.
Sometimes, in some places, for some guns.
There are states that absolutely don't that make it very difficult for concealed carry.
Sure.
Certainly not open carry.
Sure.
And so there all are kinds of rules and laws that are done
measures.
at lower.
Because a background,
it's not a.
well, it is because a background check is meaningless if it's not universal. Because if I want to purchase a firearm, okay, and I don't care to engage in a background check, there are numerous outlets for me to do so. So I don't care about a background check. If I'm criminal guy who wants to buy gun for criminal reasons, I don't need it.
Okay, yeah. So what does keep a criminal guy from getting guns?
Access, difficulty of access.
How difficult would you have to
pretty
make
damn
access
difficult
in the United States?
Pretty damn difficult because we have
to actually keep
yeah.
criminals from getting, because criminals don't care about laws.
Generally speaking,
so they're gonna. So for a criminal, it's opportunity, it's convenience. It's how easy is it for me to get this thing?
So the harder we make it, the less likely they'll have them.
All right, but we already have more guns than people in this country in circulation. Right. Not on store shelves that can be
no, in possession,
in people's homes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Lawfully.
So the genie's out of the bottle there.
Well out of the bottle.
So what do you want to do? You want to take people's guns away from them?
Just to be clear, I'm not suggesting this is easy or even possible. But
let's pretend.
But yes, that would be the thing to do.
Let's not worry about ease or possibility.
You would have to.
Let's tackle this from strictly a moral perspective.
You would have to remove as many guns from circulation, whether in store shelves or in people's homes, as is possible to do.
So it is possible to have a mandatory buyback program. Other countries have done that. That is doable.
Yeah. And it works.
You can make people into criminals by saying, if you violate this and you are now in possession of this thing, that's illegal.
It wouldn't be the first time any government, and in the United States for that matter, has turned its citizens into criminals by changing a law.
Right. You think? So you're saying that the moral good that is done by reducing the number of gun deaths as a consequence of that is worth the moral bad of turning people into criminals for legally owning.
Yeah, I do. And the reason is though, because there's a few legitimate reasons to own a firearm. And I say legitimate because
so what are they?
The arguments that I'm sure will be made if Brett were here about hunting and target shooting and collecting and all that sort of thing.
No.
But there are a few legitimate reasons in my view for a human to own a gun. It's to defend against somebody else with or without a gun. Okay. And a conceptual one that I think is a really neat idea and that I agree with philosophically, but I don't think has any place practically. And the idea that the guns are there to protect us from our government if our government should overstep, such that we may revolution, such that we may, as the people, take back our government in the way that we see fit from wherever tyranny it's headed to or toward or whatever. And I like that one. That one's a really solid philosophical one. It's the second that's there to protect the first. Okay.
You do realize that was the intent behind the second. Right? That was the point about its when it was created at the time. Then
I don't know
it wasn't. It wasn't done for self-defense or to protect hunting.
I think
it was done to prevent potential tyranny.
I think that as a concept, and I don't have any kind of solid proof to it, but historically speaking, I think that as a concept that we just laid out there is something that is a little bit more modern than we think it is.
No,
I do.
It's literally in the first half of the amendment. A militia, of a well-regulated militia being necessary to the insurance of like a free state, something like that, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Right. All right. So the first half is explaining the second half. It's literally in the amendment. It's basically giving you the context for why the amendment exists.
So the idea that a well-regulated militia equals an independent citizenry armed, I think is a fallacy. I don't think that that's the case. I think that
Huh?
a well-regulated militia equals the military. Hold on.
No, there was no military at the time.
Right. It equals the military, which is comprised of a citizenry that has the right to bear arms such that they may be formed into a well-regulated militia, which is effectively the military. At the time that it was written, there was no real military. There was simply a bunch of us with guns who banded together in a militia that was well-regulated such that it was the military at the time. And at the time that it was written, those well-regulated militias were disbanded and then rebanded and then disbanded. And then eventually somebody went, we might need ourselves a permanent military. So the well-regulated militia component with the right to bear arms sort of dissolved itself a little bit as its need left as we created military.
So you're saying that the militia wasn't there to protect against our own government's tyranny.
No.
It was to protect against an external government's tyranny.
It was written into the thing to say, hey, we need a method to defend ourselves, and that method is a well-regulated militia.
If that's true, that is extremely myopic on the part of those people who penned it, because why they felt that the government that they used to belong to as colonies, which at that time was internal to them, right? They were part of it, right? Their revolution caused them to become separate from it. And then they thought what? That the only threats would come from outside?
I mean, do you believe that? Okay, and this is a legitimate question. I don't know the answer at all, so it's not a pointed question. Do you think that the colonists that then made up the revolutionary militia, do you think that they all fully understood what it is that they were actually doing, and that they gathered that they were on full-fledged revolution, and that the government that was being formed around them or next to them as they fought against the tyranny that they hated so much, do you think they understood the complexity and the nuance of what was being created?
No, but the leaders did.
Right. But do you think that in that scenario that they thought that, oh, well, this last government we had, we didn't like, and so we wanted to fight them, but this new government might also be bad? I don't think that the people in general understood that. Maybe the founders did. I think the founders did understand that quite clearly.
I think the people who were in that hot, sweaty room understood that. And when they wrote that in there, it killed a couple birds with one stone. They can use the militia to fight off external threats, but certainly also they could use the militia as in case of emergency, break glass.
Yeah. So
for
again, philosophically, I don't disagree with it as a concept. In fact, I quite agree with it. I think it's actually a rather interesting thing, but I don't believe that at the time that it was written.
You don't think it's relevant in modern?
I think it's a more modern concept. I really do.
Let's assume that you're right. Do you think that the idea that we should have the ability to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government is relevant in the modern age?
I don't think.
Why not?
Forget weapons for a moment. As a society, as a people, we are insufficiently organized to do so. Even if you and I had a shared interest in some fighter jets and some tanks and some RPGs and some, we do not have a sufficient common interest. Now, you could argue that as a citizenry, we could operate a guerrilla war against our own military if we wanted to, but I don't believe that we are sufficiently cohesive in our culture, in our language, in our ideas to do so. Even on the extremes of politics.
Your argument is based off of an assessment of our potential efficacy, not the moral right to do it. You may be right. You may well be right that a tyrannical government would be able to scatter us and rule us with their military-grade weapons, which, by the way, we can get into because actually I think that's another problem, but we can get into that later.
He works in the government.
Oh, dude, there are lots of people who work in the government who are,
No, I'm talking about
right-leaning, left-leaning.
your knowledge of potential weaponry. So
No.
no, can't talk about that.
No, we can't. So it doesn't matter. You might be right. We might be 350 million idiots up against an army of 3 million who all of them, even though they're from the people, become brainwashed and decide that they're going to...
In this scenario where we go military versus people. Right.
Right? So you may well be right, and we get scattered to the four winds, and our government cracks down on all of us, and that's it, right? Revolution squashed. Do we not have the right to that? We're not allowed to attempt it. We're not allowed the attempt to defend ourselves against
Well, but
it.
here's the question. So whether or not we're allowed to depends on who is allowing us to do things. From a rights perspective, no, there's absolutely no right to overthrow the government in our Constitution. None. Zero. Zilch. I know, Second Amendment, well-regulated militia. No. There is nothing in our Constitution that gives us the right to overthrow. In fact, there are a whole fucking series of regulations that are thereafter that say we cannot overthrow the government. So we do not have that right. We may want to. We may be able to.
I'm not talking about legal precedent here. I'm talking because when you're talking about the bedrock under which the philosophical bedrock that underpins a legal system, you can't use a legal system to define it because you have to go one level deeper. You have to use moral, logical, philosophical grounds to justify the legal system that you have in place. So I'm talking because at this point, if revolution is being considered on any level, right, then the legal system has broken down. So,
or at least we don't care for it anymore. It may still be operational,
exactly.
but we don't care.
So the rationale behind the legal system is no longer in play anymore. So the next level down is the moral. So are you saying that as a society, we do not morally have the right, forget the legal right, but that we don't have the moral right to defend ourselves against the potential of a tyrannical government?
I'm not saying that, but I don't believe that what we as a society think is a tyrannical government today is in fact a tyrannical government. And I also don't think that the consequences of that action are acceptable for whatever thing we think we're going to do that will make it better. In fact, I think it would be quite a bit worse. I think that this concept of like today, if today were to explode into a revolutionary war against our own government, or for that matter, more likely and more realistically, a civil war, the consequences of which would be absolutely terrifying and would not match the whatever good we could extract from it. So I think that we as human beings who are trying to be as self-determined as possible should be able to stop a tyrannical government if we see fit.
Why?
I don't think we're at that stage.
All right.
At all.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But you don't... If the government gets to the point where it is legitimately tyrannical enough that it would warrant a revolution, it will certainly have by that point eliminated the right for the citizenry to bear arms.
Sure,
So you don't wait until all the ingredients are there for a revolution before you allow the citizens to defend themselves against it.
That's not entirely true. You do generally wait. You don't just revolution because, No,
not revolution, but the things have to be like. What you're suggesting is, okay, we take away the rights for people to own guns because we're not there yet. We're not at a point where people would need to revolt.
No, that's not my argument. I think those are two separate things.
When the people would actually need to revolt, then we're going to give them the rights.
Those are two separate
things.
Here's the reality of it. And those are two separate arguments made in isolation, but I see where you're going. Nothing about any of the guns that we own as a citizenry is going to do us any good in a revolution. Maybe a little bit. Because here's the thing. If we revolution at some point or another, there are many other ways, probably more useful ways, than individuals in the streets with guns shooting up against whatever the opposing side is in this scenario. There's improvised explosives. There's foreign intervention that funnels weapons back into this place such that we can do the thing, just like there was the first time. You think all those fucking guns were just already here? The French gave us those guns during the initial revolution. Franklin went over to France and went, "Hey guys, I like your wine. Can we have some of your guns?" And they went, "Absolutely, fuck the British." So this is how it actually plays out.
Right. And so what? And so the founders, in their wisdom, said, "We don't want to have to go hat in hand begging some foreign nation. God forbid this should happen to us again. We'd like not to have to do that. So we're going to create this amendment that allows us to keep our own, so that when we eventually ramp up our own production of these arms, we'll just have them here, ready in case of an emergency. And we won't have to go to France or any other country to ask for guns when the revolution comes."
I think that sounds reasonable, but there's no evidence to say that that's the case, that's how they thought about it.
Even if they didn't, how about just from logic? Isn't that a logical thing?
That makes logical sense. It doesn't mean that it's realistic or even practical. But yeah, logically that makes sense. I mean, wouldn't you want to have, in
Why
hindsight,
isn't it realistic? It is realistic. At this point.
Again,
if we were to need revolution in this country, we don't need to ask anybody else in any other country for assistance.
So
we might need help.
Philosophically, that's true. We don't have to ask
the revolution.
We don't have to ask
for other reasons.
We don't have to ask for permission. You're absolutely right. But we wouldn't be able to accomplish it on our own.
Fine. Either because we lack cohesion, or because the military has better weapons.
Whatever the reasoning is we don't.
But morally,
no.
Morally, we have the right.
We
have the duty. Forget the right, because we also have history to look back on, and not old history either, recent history. Every single dictatorship on earth ever that has come to power has eliminated the use of guns from its citizens.
But also, not every single government that has eliminated the use of guns from their population are dictators that are trying to oppress their people.
Yet.
Maybe.
Yet.
I don't know, man. New Zealand seems like a fairly reasonable place. It doesn't seem a whole lot dictatory to me. They seem fairly reasonable. Look, Australia did the same thing, 20 years ago? I forget exactly. They had a couple of mass shootings in a row. They went, fuck this noise. They did a buyback. They made guns illegal. Lots of people got upset. Lots of people agreed. They got rid of guns for the most part. Still some guns. And those shootings effectively went away. And the people, quite frankly, are doing just fine. And if you're suggesting a long game, a governmental long game of slow,
not even, and by the way, long game, I'm half suggesting.
Okay.
The long part, I agree with. The game part, not necessarily, because I'm gonna go so far as to say this: while it may take a long time for our government or other democratic governments to tilt tyrannical. I don't necessarily think that there is a secret cabal of people in a room going like this, twisting their mustache, trying to take over. I think that the general tendency of any system is towards entropy.
Well,
so even systems of government and leadership, right? Eventually, the amount of stupid in those places of power will increase to such an extent that it's not even malice that will do it. It's just people will have such stupid ideas about regulation that they will fall into tyranny by accident.
Okay, here's one for you. The mustache twisting in secret back rooms, I will argue that that's a quick maneuver. That's a quick maneuver, and it's typically on the fascist side of the political spectrum. The large groups, society, elected representative, Republican form of governments tend towards socialism by the nature of the people, whether good or bad. Whether good or bad, whether agree or disagree. That's the the argument that those movements to more tyrannical forms of government are often quick, and they're often, and totally, buddy, and they're often made from a more right-wing fascist political spectrum, both with a similar both maybe with a similar goal, but for very different reasons and through very different methods.
Okay.
So, taking a step back to the initial question of this mental health issue that is to be corrected, and then perhaps if we got rid of the guns and then we worked on the mental health, we could somehow solve this thing, or vice versa, or whatever. As societies progress, and through that messy process of progression where I am in the middle of something, sir. Show your asshole. That's good. Very good. Okay. As societies...
Yeah, fuck you too.
As what?
Fuck you too.
As societies progress naturally, right, through this messy process of overcorrection and undercorrection and silly regulations and then some reasonable ones and so on, we tend to get more collectively better. This is not a good set of vocabulary, but you know what I mean.
You have good words.
I got I'm very highly educated. And so the point I'm trying to make is that if we were to do this thing that you suggested, where 50 or 100 years from now, we somehow put all this effort into tackle.
I'm sure, but that's your hypothetical. I'm not recommending that course of action. But yeah.
But that's where we started. And so if we were to put that effort into mental health such that we would get to this point where, like, then we could have guns, no problem. Mm-hmm. We would be in a very different place as a society, much better positioned to have larger, more collective societies that we agree on the limits we put on ourselves without this sudden danger of wanting to revolt against it. I think the reason why we revolt against anything in the first place, not it being a problem, in the first place, that part notwithstanding, but the reason why we do it is because we tend to suddenly disagree with each other about some fundamental things. And we don't disagree with each other about those fundamental things because there's necessarily a good reason to. It's but because we take our corners. We revert to our corners. We decide that the Second Amendment shall be defended along any grounds, and we decide that it should be removed along any grounds. And now suddenly we're angry at one another, where we ought not to be.
Well, while I grant you that addressing mental health would go a ways in like helping our society be more cohesive in general, mm-hmm. I don't think it's a panacea for human evolution. Well, I don't think
there is
eliminate one, right. I don't think that you're going to eliminate the natural conflicts that occur with variable ideologies in a free democratic society. You're still gonna, even if everybody's healthy enough that they're not trying to kill themselves or each other with guns, you're still gonna disagree on whether or not abortion is okay, or fucking capital punishment, or whatever, or gerrymander, whatever the fucking thing is that you've got. That's that's the conflict of
those
the day,
kinds of disagreements. Right? And I think we can agree on this. Maybe we can't. Maybe we can. I don't know. We had the Hitler one from the last one, so let's see what happens on this one. Is disagreeing on those types of topics do not require violence.
No,
nothing really, quite frankly, with other than violence requires violence. There's no reason why we can't discuss and compromise and agree or disagree on topics without violence. We just haven't figured out how to do that yet.
The only time where I think violence is necessary is when people impose restrictions on the freedoms of others. Right?
See, I don't agree. Because
when you impose a restriction on my freedom that I deem unwarranted,
you think that the appropriate response is
violence. My recourse, because if you're in the position of authority that for whatever reason allows you to enact this restriction on my life, and I don't agree with this restriction, what recourse do I have?
Are you
so that I can?
Are you in a tribe, or
free myself of this restriction?
Are you in a tribe, or are you in our current system of government?
current system of government is a collection of tribes.
Okay, fine. But are you in like the strictest definition of a tribe where there's no real rules except for like?
Am I in Waco, Texas? No. Am I some? No, I'm not talking about some like cloistered, not part of the system group of people I'm talking about. I'm in our current government right now.
Okay, so what
right?
level?
What recourse do I have as a citizen?
What level of infringement on some right that you deem that you have? What level of infringement do you think is the threshold for your violence?
That's a good question.
I mean, because like
because that's very personal. For me, it's going to be different than for others. And I'm assuming you're asking me. You're not asking.
I mean, I am asking
general
you.
question
You're the only one here at the moment.
Yeah, but you don't want me to speculate on behalf of some average that is existent for all citizens. You're talking about what is Phil's personal barometer for
kinda.
How much infringement is too much.
I mean, how much infringement do you have? Do you even know what your threshold of infringement is?
I mean, it varies in different places. I can tell you, for instance, I currently do not follow all laws in our society.
Nobody does.
I have never been put to account for that. So I have never had those laws enforced on me. If they ever are, what will I do? I guess it depends on the consequence of the enforcement.
Okay.
How severe is the enforcement?
Let's make ourselves a fanciful little hypothetical situation. Let's say all the laws that you have not followed over the course of the last decade or so has been being tracked by some government entity, some law enforcement entity, and they finally decided, this guy Phil, he's reached his limit. We are now going to charge him with all of the crimes that he has committed. And we're going to go to his house with a warrant. We're going to arrest him. We're going to put him in prison, or we're going to put him before a trial, and then therefore try to convict him for prison. They've literally taken away your freedom, literally. Okay.
Right.
Do you feel that is a sufficient infringement for violence on your part?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if you were to, let's say, have broken a law that you deem to be a fairly reasonable one, and that same consequence occurred, would you?
When you say fairly,
well, I mean, you have to decide for yourself.
A law that I agree with.
Yeah, something that you agree with, but you broke it.
I don't break laws I agree with.
Yeah, but what if you did? Right? What if you accidentally? I mean, there's a reason why manslaughter is a term. It's not a premeditated killing of another human. It is an accidental one.
But I still
recklessness.
agree with the idea of being punished for manslaughter.
Okay,
you shouldn't get away just because you accidentally killed somebody.
So,
yeah, it was an accident. You didn't mean to, but you still killed somebody.
So that's what I'm saying. So you broke a law, right? Unintentionally, right? You believe you should face the consequence. If the same set of consequences were to be imparted on you, they would come to your house, take you, put you in prison. Do you believe that violence is a proper recourse?
No. The only time I feel infringed upon is when I believe that the nature of the enforcement is disproportionate to the law that has been broken, right? I think that there are some laws whose enforcement at all is nonsense, and it shouldn't happen.
So fundamentally, I know we've talked about this in various ways, and the stop sign always comes up.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. The laws that I don't agree with, kind of by their nature, are minor. Generally speaking, the reason why our society is as cohesive as it is because the laws that we all tend to agree with are kind of the big, obvious, no-brainer ones. Don't kill people, don't steal shit, don't rape anybody. Like, those are kind of like, if we can't agree on that, we are ultra fucked.
But like, and that's sort of my bigger point here is that in order for any of this to work, we all have to generally agree, but we also understand.
If I'm going to be jailed for jaywalking, like if the penalty for jaywalking is jail, I'm going to go out swinging, and they're going to put me away for something worse than that. They're going to put me away for like violence against a police officer. Right?
Do you believe that to be a reasonable course of action, or do you think that there's a better way to handle that?
As an individual citizen in this system, no.
Really? You think that violence think that violence is a better way to handle that sort of situation than anything else you could come up with?
I don't believe that civic engagement at this point is practical.
I believe you to be way more intelligent than that, but apparently I'm wrong.
I honestly think that the most effective an individual can be in today's modern society from a civic engagement standpoint, like for an average citizen, right? Not an activist, somebody like that who makes it their calling, but for an average citizen, I think that the most effect that you can have is being on a jury. Being as far as like legislation and as far as like getting the right people into office, I think it's a fucking shell game.
You think it's a shell game? Okay, fair enough. So you're suggesting then that provided that you as an individual do not agree with the laws that you have broken, let's say, and that if you were to face a consequence for the laws that you have broken that you don't agree with, then that your best
a disproportionate consequence. The consequence has to be disproportionate.
Well, I mean, so like if you were jaywalking, okay, and you got stopped by a police officer, you wouldn't be jailed. You'd be given a ticket.
Sure.
But if you didn't pay that ticket, and that went on for a long enough time, and you did it a few more times, eventually you could be jailed for ignoring the citations that you've been given.
Right. At which
point now you're not going to jail for jaywalking, you're going to jail for being a scofflaw, which is different.
Is that a thing? I've never heard that.
Fuck term. Yeah, scofflaw. It's when you scoff at the law. It's actually a legal term.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, and that basically, it's like if you don't pay your parking tickets, right? You don't go to jail for parking illegally. You go to jail for not paying your parking tickets and owing some amount of money on back parking tickets, which inherently I don't agree with because it's disproportionately skewed to a certain segment of the population. But okay, fine. It doesn't matter. That's the law. So
no, it does matter.
Well,
because the law is there to serve us.
And that is the point, is when a law exists that does not serve the people and exists purely to impugn those people, whether it's all of the people or some of the people, it is the duty of the people, especially those who are not directly impacted by that law, to act to change that law, which can be changed. I know you think that regulations are never repealed, but they actually are, and fine. And just for the record, I'm a huge proponent of a slow, lumbering, ineffective government. I very much I relish in a government that can't get out of its own way, that can't make changes very quickly, that argues nonsense on a regular basis, because those are the kinds of governments that cannot change things very quickly, and governments that change things quickly are fucking terrifying.
I think that the laws that exist that infringe, the little laws that infringe on our lives, are made by a government that moves too quickly. I would love the government, like you say.
That's totally incorrect.
I would love to, because it only seems to work in one direction.
No, that's
the slow lumbering government only seems to work in the direction of getting rid of rules.
That's
making new rules. They seem to do very, very fast.
That's roughly
they seem
true.
To be able to make rules all the time.
But to go back,
getting rid of rules.
To go back to the original concept that we talked about the local, the state, the county, blah blah blah, all that sort of thing, right? The smaller the government, the more quickly it can make and break rules effectively. So a local government, like the city of fucking, I don't know, a city, can make rules fairly quickly that are about jaywalking or not. Right? The federal government has nothing to say about jaywalking. Nothing. There's nothing. And I say this with confidence, even though I've not read all of the things. I can say that the federal government has no rules regarding jaywalking.
I hope you're right.
I'm right enough. Right? But the city of Washington, D.C. certainly might. And it can make them much more quickly than the federal government as an entity could.
Sure.
And so the bigger the government, the more ineffective the government, the more lumbering, the more angry the government makes the people because of its ineffectiveness, I think the better, because, in fact, then things like that don't happen. But I think and this is a very good point for the next episode, where we should consider this as a topic. The question of if and when violence of any kind is appropriate as a recourse for anything the government does, or if there is a better way to do it. Because I think in this scenario, I inherently disagree with you. I'm not saying that I wouldn't perpetrate violence if I felt that I was being infringed upon, because I'm a human and I might. But I don't think it's the best solution. I don't think it's the effective solution. I don't think it's the one that gets the thing to be fixed in the way that we want to.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not suggesting that it would be effective. I'm just saying that as an individual, that's my best and only recourse. I honestly don't think that at this point, with our representative government, which I understand the reason for representative democracy, for a republic as opposed to a straight democracy, the incentive structure as it currently is, the amount of reform that would need to occur before voting means something again is tremendous.
Interesting.
You need to clear so much shit out of the road before you can even start to drive on it again, that the idea that like, oh, we have cars so we can get from point A to point B. Yeah, no. Not until you clear first the 8-foot high mountain of crap that the entire road is full with before you can even start to use the road again to get where you want to go.
On the next episode of the End Ayoub podcast. Thanks for listening.
No. Testing sound. Sound test. We got a boom, Electric Avenue. Do I need to lower the gain? More words to do this stupid sound test. God, if you keep any of this, Mark, I swear to God.